Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today. We've got some very interesting topics to discuss today with the theme of nuclear future. So my name is Sarah Wilkin. Hopefully we already know each other and we're already in each other's loop. But I hope we're also going to meet some new people today as well. We've got a really interesting interview with Andrew Murdoch from Newcleo, who are an SMR developer. If you are not sure what an SMR is, then Andrew is going to explain all later. And we'll be also having a feature from Fayaz from SAF Investor and discussing the Oliver Stone documentary Nuclear Now. So I would like to just start kind of by letting you know about some of our topics and themes. So, Fly Green Alliance. Oh, is it okay if everybody mute? Sorry, if everybody can mute, that would be great. So yeah, I just would like to let you know about some of our themes. Our themes for Fly Green Alliance in general have been to do around with travel and discovery, a lot about innovation and science. It is also design thinking from my previous career and also culture and society. Oh, sorry, is everybody able to mute just as we're recording? That would be great. Thank you. So yeah, Fly Green Alliance has really been a lot about discovery in the last 5 years that we've been around. Today, actually, it's actually 6 years since we got a Booking.com grant with the University of Amsterdam. LinkedIn has reminded me today, and actually that was a really big game changer for me personally, but also it was when certain groups said nobody outside of the aviation industry had invested or taken an interest in SAF. So Booking.com really did kind of pave the way, supporting the University of Amsterdam and myself to start that work. So it really has been absolutely about discovery. I was working in exploring the circular economy, and I discovered sustainable aviation fuel as I was doing that. And I've even been lucky enough to work with groups like CERN over my time, who of course invented the internet. So it's really always been about different trends and innovation for me. And I did even start to spot my own patterns. So even from a young age, I chose to study computing when other people weren't studying it. I started using Skype before Skype existed. That led me to then going home where we had dial-up internet, and I campaigned for broadband, and BT awarded me for that. So back, a long while ago now. So there's lots of initiatives have been happening around innovation. I realized I also I wrote a presentation for social media, and my manager back then promoted me and kind of gave me an opportunity to explore these things. So really in my career, it's been a case of dedicating myself to different innovations, and that's what I personally have put into FGA. So of course I realized that is the kind of USP of FGA, and that part of the work has been campaigning and representing and thinking of ahead of the time about what is going to be useful and beneficial. And it was kind of for society, but now, of course, also environmental topics as well. So just here is kind of a few forums that I've been very fortunate to be part of in the last few years. So, that is absolutely kind of part of FGA now. It's making sure that we are we are kind of spreading the innovation to larger groups. That's somebody to mute. I can hear somebody at the moment. Thank you. So then another really important aspect that I realized as a founder, you're kind of becoming you're thinking of an idea and putting it towards everybody. And
thank you, Alison.
There's a few. It's nobody's. Can everybody mute, please? So a few. I didn't do the housekeeping earlier on. If everybody can put themselves on mute, that would be really good as we're recording. So thank you very much. So yeah, a really big part of FGA has been being a messenger and communicating. And I realized also what I had been doing in the past was working in tech roles, but being that in-between person to really communicate science and technology to wider audiences. And that is absolutely what I've been doing with FGA as well, and making sure that we are really getting initially the message about sustainable aviation fuel and net zero, but we're kind of really broadening our areas of interest, and that's also later why we are meeting Andrew from Newcleo to discuss SMRs. So we've got it is a wide and innovative agenda for us, and that is definitely what we're all about. So it started, as I mentioned, from one project at the University of Amsterdam, and we called it Jet Fuel from Waste, and that was in 2019. Since then, of course, we had some big global incidents happening, and what came out of that was some of the acceleration of work for SAF. So what that one project with the Booking.com grant has now led to 19 clients for FGA, and now we have 12 members of In the Loop since December. And the principles behind In the Loop, which I'll go into a bit more later, but it's also about we are in each other's loop and we are supporting each other to meet new people, to have new contacts, and to develop our loop so it is bigger. So there's a few different layers that I want to kind of explain and go through to really kind of show what we are all about as well. We have our tech and data layer, which is the SAF and all of the topics I've discussed. But now what we want to do and what we find is really the part that people really like to get involved with. They like it, they find it interesting in their personal life as well, is film, media and culture, using different language, in kind of thinking like the circular economy, behavioral change. And this isn't separate from the tech. You really need to weave in parts of societal acceptance topics and really think about how people work. So it really is, of course, about connection as well. Anyone that's working in ESG and any technology that is innovative, it's really tough. It can be very tough, and you're basically paving new paths. And that's what we have been doing. So what I want In the Loop to be is to bring these groups together so everybody has an ability to speak with people in a similar thinking, with similar challenges, and then also have a forum where we can feed back to each other. FJ is certainly an information gatherer as well, and AI, of course, is a version of this, and everyone is kind of debating what AI will do. But actually what people say is AI still cannot do the comprehension and it cannot do the thinking. So that's what I absolutely use digital and AI, but I think we need to also bring back the comprehension and thinking part and connection. And that's what I want In the Loop to be about as well. And then with it, we will be facilitators and supporters for business development, new initiatives, new thinking to really get out there to a wider group. So, and of course, In the Loop is for our members, their organizations, and it is with a net zero agenda. Somebody just said they can't hear. Can everybody hear generally? Can you nod if that's okay? Okay, thank you. Sorry, there must be some technical issues coming up. So yeah, our main layer the last layer I mentioned is really for members to make sure our agendas aligned on the net zero topics. And with this, what I realized over my time becoming a business developer 5 years ago, was that you made partnerships and you made trust when you were familiar with people, and meetings were consistent. To be very kind of practical about it, we are all talking about accelerating net zero. However, some of the blockers are the partnerships, because people don't know each other or they don't know each other well. So really what we want to do is make sure that every month we are spending as much time with people as we can in our loop. They are familiar with us. They can see how we talk, see how we frame things, how we problem solve, and that we keep showing up. And I think a lot of people have seen that FGA is 5 years later. Some have gone off to back to jobs and back to other careers and things like that, and changed. But we have been consistently showing up for the last 5 years and progressing the work, which I will go into more later. So I think that is really a core part as well. It's getting to know everybody in that deeper level, so we know the people and personalities. You know your personality. We also know skill sets, abilities, what you want to do as a business, what your targets are, and this really will be part of the program as well. So a few numbers actually to give you a little bit of context on what has happened in the last 5 years. So I actually started researching 7 years ago. I started researching SAF. I found it fascinating. I met Shiji Ravindran. He told me, he's a chemical engineer. He told me about the technology and how all of his projects sounded like very impactful. And he was also very happy. So I realized he was really making a difference. And I found it, very, very interesting. So I studied it in my spare time. I then had an opportunity to write the grant and really put a year's worth of full study and research into it. I was very fortunate then with Shiju, we gained the grant. Now it is 6 years, January, 6 years ago. Since then, as I said, we've worked with lots of different global brands, but we've also been part of opening that net zero market and building a new industry. This industry didn't exist before, and now I realize we can use all of these skills and insights to really also support other net zero industries and tech. So, and despite the pandemic, FGA's made about 300K. Maybe it could have been more, it could have been less. It's also been about reinvesting that back into the business and growing the network and reach. So this can only now develop and go further as our network is established, our foundational work is done, and we are now starting to grow our not only community and membership, but it is, of course, the influence. So, and some of that influence is that we've now got 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. We've worked with groups with 1 million on social media, 19,000 business traveler clients, and we've enabled SAF deals and off-takes with the likes of Amex, Formula E, and it's led to bigger opportunities and deals at strategic level. So this is the kind of work that I've done on a consultancy level that then expands that net zero reach. And that was just me. Now we are growing and we get our bigger team, we will be doing a lot more. So we have put together a declaration. I won't go into all of this right now, but it is a lot of what I've said. We've been the messenger. I've spoken at 45 different events, panels, workshops. It has been writing reports. We're going to send a report out later on in the chat as well. There's a new report we've written thought leadership. We've been writing standards for the business aviation sector. We've done national level work. So this is all kind of contributing and voluntary work that we put into making this new market and new net zero initiatives. So I will send this out later. And then who is joining us and who is in our loop already? So here's a list of very varied businesses. Some of it is from data, so there's CSRD platforms, data, Earthlies, offsets, Cargill, biodiesel producers, airlines, a foundation from California, SMR developers, the Turkish Nuclear Association, and some also in observer mode, which is also absolutely fine as people want to see and maybe they want to develop that work later. So we're also open to this. I think that's also important to enable that. So a variety, but all of the kind of the common denominators are that everybody is working on net zero in certain ways. So what this then does, as I mentioned, the whole premise is that we are building trust and opportunities. So it is once we get to know our In the Loop members more, or the people we are working with, we know what opportunities to bring to them. We know to look out for certain events or intros or speaker spots, and it is really having our members in mind to support them in the tough job being an ESG or net zero manager, making introductions to solutions, and then really being that supportive role and coordinating to help that, and coordinating and facilitating to help move that along. And then what we got a lot of feedback that people didn't know how to, it was maybe their budget was small, but they really liked what we were doing or thought it was definitely valuable, but they didn't know how. So we've made a way to basically make it much easier. We've made the fee much lower so it's accessible to a bigger amount of people, because we realize this work we're doing is all net zero is across every sector as well. So we are working with aviation and fuels, but travel is a common denominator for all sectors. So we do want all sectors to be involved, to contribute, and to also know what that contribution is. So just to kind of go into that further, we are also doing pro bono work, voluntary work. We're going to conferences, we're speaking at conferences, we're putting in meetings, we're having meetings with senior decision makers, we're putting it on the agenda. We're attending different conferences such as The Economist. Unfortunately, also due to budget, I couldn't attend COP last year, but these are all meetings that are really important to push work forward. So what we do want to do is have our group contribute to that. And I've just done some simple maths here, because what we can do with a larger group is maintain a consistent level of input by Fly Green Alliance, which means we can go to the really important meetings, we can go to working groups, we can be part of consortium and all of this work that is really pushing net zero forward. So, and a lot of it is unpaid. So we believe it's a two-way street. We can bring you insights and information and benefits, and we would want you to contribute to Fly Green Alliance's work as well. And we want that to be simple, but also understood that it is a two-way street, and we'll happily demonstrate that clearly. So, and a bit what I have wanted Fly in the Loop to be, and definitely in the future, is information sharing, as I said, facilitation and coordination. So we have already sent out a list of conferences to support people with their agendas this year and to manage their budget. We have a couple of also codes. So Fast Markets is a biodiesel and now SAF conference, which has happened in Rotterdam previously. I spoke at this one a couple of years ago, and I found it really beneficial to understand what the biofuel markets was happening with policy and their business development, because it did affect SAF. So it was really kind of a different environment, a different group of insights and developers, but it was all very useful. So if you want to go to that conference, you can get a 15% discount with FGA15 as the code. Also, there is a SAF conference coming up in Amsterdam at the end of February, and you can have a 50% off that, 50% reduction discount off that conference if you're interested. So that will be Amsterdam in February. We will also send out another conference list because a lot of conferences are coming up for the next 2 quarters, and it is helpful to know pricing, dates, and city locations. So those conferences are going to be across Europe. And then also what we will do is support people with information such as this. If you are a UK business, then Innovate UK can provide a £700 bursary for travel to certain conferences. And there is a list of conferences that applies to. And as part of In the Loop, I can send that information and link out. Again, it's the same with the Horizon Europe. There is a £5,000 Horizon Europe grant, and that actually closes at the end of January. But if you are interested in finding a grant for 5,000, we can also support you with that information. There was webinars coming up. This is specifically a sports and travel webinar. So also, if you want to attend certain webinars, what we will be doing as part of In the Loop is keeping an eye out on all of these information webinars, the invites, and then we'll send them to our In the Loop members. So yeah, we are going to be testing content, testing features and testing what is useful for members. So this is a couple of suggestions. If you think there's any other useful piece of information or insights that you would like to gain, then please let me know. And then there's lots of different insights that we can support with for business development purposes. We'll also be aggregating, gathering different ESG vacancies across Europe. And this is a list of some of them available. I will be able to send any of these links out to In the Loop members. And yeah, so as I said, we're kind of going to test some different information, test some features. And what I'm very pleased that one of our features is going to be with SAF Investor. So as I've said, there's lots of different topics that we are looking into now. It is generally across travel, transport, carbon reduction, and technology. It has, of course, been about SAF since the beginning of FGA. So this is why I wanted to definitely have a section on SAF, which Fayaz from SAF Investor is going to talk through with us. So Fayaz, I will hand over to you for some insights on Trump administration mandates and policy. Thanks, Fayaz.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I hope everyone can hear me fine.
Yeah.
As Sarah mentioned, I am Fayaz Hussain. I work as an editor for SAF Investor. We are a platform that focuses exclusively on sustainable aviation fuel investments and developments. At SAF Investor, we try to keep track of capital flows, analyze policy developments, provide in-depth coverage of technological breakthroughs in the SAF sector. And our primary readership includes institutional investors, project developers, airlines, policymakers, who in a way rely on our analysis and information to make decisions in this rapidly evolving and developing sector. Today, in the spirit of keeping in the loop, we will try to look at 2 key events that have happened in January 2025. One is in the US. The other one is basically a report released by UK Innovate, which kind of looks at the investment patterns within SAF sector and how which sectors, which regions are attracting the capital that is needed to scale the sector. So let me start with the situation in the US. Just last week, during his inauguration, President Trump initiated what he calls a tide of change. He signed 46 executive orders. 6 of them were related to energy. One of them was related to SAF, which essentially paused all of the incentives that were supposed to go to SAF And basically, what they've done is they framed it as a standard 60-day review period, as in allowing the administration to understand what kind of incentives are in place before releasing funds. But the reality is a lot more complex. It took the US Treasury Department to announce these incentives nearly 2.5 to 3 years. And with the freezing of the Inflation Reduction payments, this kind of puts the incentives on a back burner. If you speak any producer or any investor who's looking to invest in SAF in the US, they are absolutely worried about what the future is going to look like. And the timing couldn't be more challenging. There are multiple. Consider the example of, say, Montana Renewables, who are the leading SAF producers in the US. They're still awaiting guidance on whether this feedstock would qualify for the incentives under Inflation Reduction Act or not. And the recent guidance did clarify some feedstocks and their eligibility. If you've heard of Lanza Jet, they import ethanol from Brazil. So their ethanol has qualified for incentives, beef tallow, etc. FOGs have qualified. But the most important one is they've completely banned imports of used cooking oil, which is basically, if you look at the data, in the last 2 years, US has imported more used cooking oil in the last 10 years combined. And they've primarily been using it to produce SAF, but also to produce or other biofuels as well, say renewable diesel and other byproducts. And this regulatory uncertainty poses a particular threat to smaller producers with weaker balance sheets who may need to restrict operations, but also kind of look at shutting down entirely. But the industry is now looking at discussing the potential of extending the 40B SAF credits, which expired on December 2024 last year. Basically, it was a blender's tax credit. You could import SAF and then blend it into existing Jet A, and then you would still qualify for incentives. But since January 1st, those blenders' incentives have been replaced by producers. You have to produce SAF in the US. So SAF production facilities require significant capital investments and also long-term planning. So this uncertainty around incentives put the projects in a limbo. This could also create a domino effect for throughout the supply chain. I mean, affecting feedstock suppliers, technology providers, ultimately customers who are airlines who are going to use this SAF in their ability to meet their sustainability commitments. Basically, this further delays the net zero goal that multiple companies or multiple agencies have, or organizations or sectors have in place, especially within the aviation sector. Um, because of policy uncertainty, the next news that we're going to discuss is basically a study done by Innovate UK Business Connect. Uh, they found out that so far, ever since SAF has become a relevant term or a key solution to decarbonize aviation, the industry has overall attracted nearly 15 billion in investments. US has captured nearly 46 to 47% of the 15 billion. And after US, it's France, Finland, and Canada. Those have attracted the most investment in SAF projects. What's particularly interesting is that this study finds it that it is the success to attract more capital or more investment is not tied to whether you are using a mandate or whether you have incentives in place. As long as you have a policy in place within the country for SAF, you are going to attract incentives, you are going to attract capital. That has been the key insight from this study. The US's significant share essentially correlates directly with the strong policy framework. Basically, the incentives that are currently in place in the US would help narrow the gap between conventional jet fuel and sustainable aviation fuel by basically reducing the operating cost of fuel costs for airlines in order to ensure that adoption is high and the aviation sector emissions are relatively lower. And similarly, the UK and EU have basically attracted investment based off of the mandates, which essentially creates a demand for SAF, and it attracts investors because people or investors or funds know there is going to be a demand because there is a mandate in place. So regardless of what kind of a policy you have, whether it's incentives or whether it's mandates, as long as you have a policy, you are going to attract investments in SAFs. That has been the key findings of this survey that UK Business Connected and published a week ago. In order to but there is also a lot needs to be done, because if you contextualize the number of 15 billion that has been invested in SAF so far, according to IATA, the industry will probably need 17 to 18 billion every year up until 2050 in order to decarbonize. So this is just the first step, and the industry needs to consistently attract this much investment from investor. But it would basically necessitate that there are policies and there are frameworks in place within the countries, within those jurisdictions, so it is conducive for investors to invest into these projects. One surprising finding, if you are aware of the SAF industry, you probably know that a lot of the production or a lot of the existing projects are HEFA based. They use bio-based feedstock, which is essentially FOGs, fats, oils, and greases. And if you look at all of these, but the key finding that the analysis found is that investors are interested in power to liquid and other alcohol to jet pathways. And as you are all aware, power to liquid is essentially one of the cheapest ways of SAF that could produce SAF in the future. So investment into these new pathways basically gives us it's a very good omen for the industry overall, because if we are going to concentrate investment into, say, HEFA pathway alone, that all of these regions are going to compete for the same feedstock, and it would not achieve the economies of scale that the SAF industry needs at the moment, because the biggest challenge to SAF at the moment is basically the high price.
Yeah, and I want to just add one point there. So the power to liquid pathway can also be called eFuels.
Yeah.
eSAFs or eFuels. So the feedstock for eFuels or eSAFs can also be CO2 and decarbonised electricity. So that will lead us on to our discussion later with the SMR developer. So I just, wanted to say that at this point for anybody that didn't know that power to liquid term. Thanks, Fayez.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have multiple options to get that power wherever you want it from. You can get it from fossil fuel, but that won't qualify for the incentives because it would have a much larger carbon footprint. But to use options like, say, renewable energy and nuclear, those are the really decarbonized ways to get that electricity to convert it into fuel in the future. But as we look ahead, I think it's very important to understand that from a policy perspective, you need to have a policy in place in order to attract investments in SAF. And if you are basically dilly-dallying on policy or delaying it, or basically causing uncertainty, as we are seeing in the US, it is going to have medium to long-term consequences for the industry within that sector. And it's also going to kind of uh, decrease the investors' appetite for that particular region, especially say in the US. We're probably going to see the consequences of this in the next 6 to 9 months. But the study clearly shows that you need to have a robust policy, you need to be consistent, you need to either have incentives or have mandate, which basically necessitates demand. I'm just going to close this off. The next few years will be very crucial. The divergence, convergence of policy support, technology, and increasing investor interest create a very unique opportunity for this new industry to scale. But success will require coordination across governments, industry players, and financial institutions to ensure policies actually translate into production capacity. And to close it off, we are also will be hosting a conference later this year in London on May 28th and 29th, where we'll explore all of these topics in much more detail. Policies, investment trends, innovations. We have multiple producers, feedstock suppliers, and other players who are attending. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you guys have any questions, please do drop them in the chat or raise your hand and I can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. The link to the SAF Investor Conference is in the chat at the moment, and it will be in the follow-up. So it is important, as Fayez said, to understand that policy doesn't necessarily mean it's just going to roll out. So again, this is a really key reason that In the Loop and Fly Green Alliance is in existence and growing our work as quickly as we can. It is really about getting this work into businesses, in the partnerships happening, the collaboration. As Fayez said, it is about coordination and collaboration now. So all of the members that I am now speaking with are actively working on this, and we wish to have a really key part in that facilitation. We, as I said, 5 years. We've done our work now for 5 to 7 years, and it is only now that we are starting to see it really kind of moving into a lot more action. The UK has mandates now, the EU, the US does have policy, and we will obviously see what happens in the fallout. But from the SAF investors, they feel like the policy is not going to be very too detrimental in the US. So these are really key points. And actually, I'll just, for the sake of time, we have some other feature sections such as spotted on social and featured location. This is a net zero town, actually. I want to just kind of skip through these and maybe discuss them later if you think they're a good content feature piece for In the Loop. But really, I think to kind of tie into the conversation about policy and also the topics that Fayaz has brought up, we can move on to what is happening this week. So this week is Nuclear Week in Parliament, and this is even more significant this year because the group, the National Nuclear Lab, has now been given His Majesty's Government's Royal Coat of Arms, which has really changed kind of how the group are working, and they're now aligned very directly with the government's targets and initiatives for net zero. So I was invited to speak at COP last year by DESNZ, Department of Security and Net Zero, Energy Security and Net Zero. So we, FGI, are in touch with kind of a national level governments. We also contributed to the Welsh National Net Zero 2035 plan, and that was put live last year. So there are a certain level of work that we are now doing that we also want to let people know that we're doing this and to align it with national plans such as the UK NNL, but also the UK's Department of Transport is really working on some topics that we've been working on also last year, and that is also including nuclear into the net zero pathways. So this leads me to introduce you to Andrew Murdoch, who is Head of UK Operations at Newcleo. Andrew, thanks for joining, Andrew.
My pleasure.
Newcleo is a fascinating company. And an SMR developer. So I will move on to your slide where, if you'd like to explain, please tell us about yourself, Newcleo, what an SMR is, and give people that might not know within the aviation and ESG sectors a bit of a lowdown on what you're doing at Newcleo.
Thanks, Sarah, and hi, everyone. So, Andrew Murdoch, I am MD for Newcleo in the UK. I've worked in nuclear development, I guess, for the last decade or so, working on bringing forward large-scale gigawatt plant initially, and in the last, I guess, nearly 3 years working for Newcleo on SMRs and our particular technology, which is called an advanced modular reactor. So let me start with the question first. What's an SMR? I mean, effectively, nuclear plant over many decades has generally sought economy of scale. So plants have got bigger, outputs getting larger. Hinkley Point C, something like 1,700 megawatts per unit, so a very significant scale output. So an SMR effectively switches economy of scale for economy of series. And the aim is to reduce the kind of time scale and the cost for individual units and to deliver the economy across a fleet of reactors rather than individual one-offs. And so, they tend to be smaller by name. And then there's a focus on sort of standardizing construction, standardizing design, using modularity, using off-site prefabrication, modern methods of construction, transportable items, trying to basically increase the repeatability of projects, reducing the risk in projects. Then there's a sort of aspect of safety. The more advanced nuclear technologies tend to be more passively safe. So they're reliant on physics more than they are on active safety systems, and that simplifies the design. It makes it easier to make it safe. And so by reducing complexity, you reduce cost. And then sort of finally, you have a wider range of application because it's smaller, because you've got more flexibility about where you locate it. You can start locating reactors adjacent to energy demand. You start to then be able to exploit the capabilities of combined heat and power, embedded generation, providing data centers, all that sort of stuff with power. And obviously things like eFuels, e-chemicals, as we're here to talk about today. So just a little bit about Newcleo. We are a pretty new company. We're about 3 years old. We've raised over 500 million euros to date from founding back in September 2021. We're focused on a type of technology called a lead-cooled fast reactor. It's a generation 4 technology advanced modular reactor. We're focused on something like a 200 megawatt commercial scale reactor, which we aim to have online by around about 2033 as a first commercial scale. But also we're using what's called mixed oxide fuel. So because we're a fast reactor, it means we can use a wider range of fuels. And so we aim to use spent nuclear fuel from the conventional fleet of power plants, reprocessed to create mixed oxide fuel, which can then power our reactors. So our reactors won't need to mine natural uranium, but equally they can do what we call multi-reprocessing. So you take the spent fuel from our reactors and we can reprocess that to make new fuel for our reactors. So you effectively maximize the energy that you get from every kilogram of mined uranium, but also you kind of move beyond having these long-lived wastes that come from nuclear. We don't produce any more of those. We basically take them and we use them, and we produce fission fragments, which are generally much shorter, sort of 300 years, and you have the radiotoxicity of mined uranium. So a very different kind of perspective on nuclear, but delivering all the benefits that of SMRs, but also, as I said, that circular economy aspect that I've just described.
Yeah, I think the circular aspect, so many people will not know also some of the topics you've discussed, Asher. I think that, that we have a lot of course, it is a completely new topic for a lot of people that already know Fly Green Alliance and us. So we are going into new territory here. I think a lot of the takeaways that I've seen from exploring the areas further is, and especially Newcleo's technology, it is a circular economy. And I think that's what, and that you do not need to, like fuels, we're aiming not to dig anymore out of the ground. We're trying to reuse the hydrocarbons and the carbon with Newcleo. That is one of your USPs, and that's different to other SMR or AMR developers. Would you say that's kind of your unique?
No, that's right. We are somewhat unique. We're not completely unique in that, but certainly in the European space, we're certainly pushing it far harder than everyone else. And if I'm honest, our founder Stefano Buono, when he created the company, he got a history in nuclear physics and working in the kind of what's called transmutation of minor actinides. I'm not going to explain that, but a lot of research in what you do with nuclear waste, basically. And he's always had the vision of moving into nuclear energy, and that's where he finds himself now. But it's a natural joining together of his sort of academic past with his kind of more entrepreneurial approach now. And we're finding that there is a huge amount of traction for our ambition and across Europe and elsewhere. And that's really, we're sort of, we use the word disruptor as a startup, but we really are sort of disrupting the traditionalist approach to nuclear, where people tend to be focused in country and focused on things being a national solution. And we're looking at, no, actually, you can privately fund nuclear. You can combine it with all of these wider applications that we're here talking about today. But also you can bring a lot more pan pan-European, pan-international collaboration to solve some of these issues like waste.
Yeah.
Which you know, that's a really different approach.
Yeah, and I think also Newcleo's story is and a development is interesting because I know your founder has already been an entrepreneur. He's already experienced it successfully scaling, like
right.
a big, yeah. And I know that Newcleo, yeah, you are 3 years old and went from 20 employees to 950. So that is the scale of the ambition and the kind of acceleration that Newcleo is having in the area now. It does seem very new to some people. Of course, it's not. And the well, actually, I will rephrase that. So the report that is going to be sent out to everybody, it will talk about that fission has been around since, for military purposes, 1945, and for energy purposes since 1956. The difference, so maybe this is for you to explain, Andrew, but the difference between an SMR and a classic nuclear power station is size. And do you want to kind of say some main differences?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I've explained some of it already. I mean, a lot of it is size, but there's two types of sort of SMR, right? There's what we call the Generation 3+. It's most large-scale reactors around the world are what's called pressurized water reactors. They use water to cool the vessel, the reactor, and they're pressurized. So you know they're operating in a situation where there's a lot of containment needed around the vessel. That's a sort of conventional SMR. And then we have these Generation 4 SMRs. They use novel technologies and novel coolants. So we use liquid lead. Others use liquid sodium. There's a molten salt reactor. There's a sort of high temperature gas reactor. They're all slightly different and they all have slightly different benefits. But the main difference of the advanced technologies are two things. One is they have elevated temperatures compared. So if you're looking at using heat, particularly for electrolysis of hydrogen, segues back to SAF, you know, the heat combined with electrolysis, high temperature electrolysis, improved efficiency. So there's a much broader potential of uses of the higher technologies. The other aspect of these advanced technologies is that they are even more passively safe. So liquid lead operates, we operate at atmospheric pressure. There's no sort of significant loss of coolant accident scenario. So actually everything's much simpler. And it's relying on physics, as it were, to prevent nuclear accidents rather than relying on something kicking in to protect from a situation, or overpressurization event or whatever it is. So they're easier to make safe. That's the point. So again, in terms of broadening up the application, the ability to co-locate, etc., they're much broader in their use, and so it makes it much easier to use for an industrial application.
Yeah, exactly. I'll come on to SAFs in a minute, because the classic nuclear power station, which has been around for a long time as well, is much bigger and it requires a lot more investment. So what the SMRs are also able to do, and this is one point that I noticed being new to the industry, is that you can even transport the components of SMRs around by ship or road. You can co-locate one of the sites. And also, yeah, as we just kind of discussed this before, Andrew, the amount of investment required. So I was at the World Nuclear Association end user meeting in January, a couple of weeks ago in London. And HSBC presented, and it's one of the banks that have said, we've always invested in nuclear since the start. WNA now have 14 banks that have said, we will invest in nuclear. We did some maths in our prep discussion, Andrew, and we said, actually, HSBC was saying they would typically loan around 300 million per project. So do you want to kind of go through the maths then, Andrew, that we were discussing earlier?
Yeah, I mean, someone asked in the chat as well that how much is an SMR. I mean, for nth of a kind type units, you know, we'd be targeting something like I think 4,000 euros a kilowatt, right? Or 200 megawatts, about 800 million euros. I mean, the large chunks of money, but if you talk about levelized cost, you're looking at maybe mid 50s, 60 euro per megawatt hour. So if you think offshore wind is in the last auction round around about let's say 50 in the UK, 50 pounds, and that's kind of intermittent without energy storage. So there's certainly a strong argument that SMRs will compete with firm renewable power when you take into account the realm of it. I mean, I think the other point is then your question, Sarah. Ours is a 200 megawatt unit. Maybe you build them on multiples. I mean, a hyperscaler in data center space, right, 800 megawatt ish, is a large hyperscaler. That would be 4 of our units. If you're looking at, and we're working in a collaboration with a company called Mara Technomon in Italy, and their subsidiary called NextChem, focused on this whole sort of e-chemical space. And their idea of a kind of hydrogen plant is, again, it's about 800 megawatts. So you're looking at about 4 of our units. So 4 reactors, simple maths, right? 4 billion. Yeah. Let's call it that. That becomes something which banks and equity is willing to kind of support, right? When you look at the comparable gigawatt scale, and I use the rumors around Hinkley and Sizewell, 40 billion. Your order of magnitude different. It becomes so difficult for a small number of a consortium, as you were, of financiers to support that scale of project. And again, that's where SMRs really are so fundamentally different. Plus, if you imagine like the risk of cost overrun on a large project, one unit being 20 billion, or let's say whatever that is, if you're 50% over cost on that's huge. But if you deliver 10 units each at $1 billion and one of them is 50% over, that's not the end of the world.
It's about,
because the rest of them are going to be on cost, on budget, as you learn and as you progress. So that's economy of many versus the economy of scale, right? And that's really what we're looking at.
Yeah, and that's what banks can get on board with. They say 10 banks can come together and invest in the development of one SMR to really make it and then operational, another 10 banks. So we're talking, rather than it being billions and billions per bank, we're talking, it can be 3 million to spread that risk across different banks.
Right.
Just, this is information that, that HSBC, where is it? HSBC have gave us some really, I won't go into this, and the slides are available to anybody that is interested in their criteria, but they were very clear about what they need with regards to investment. Now, anybody that is on the call that is working in eSAFs, what the discussion about also SMRs is it is about, co-location. You can share. A lot of the SAF producers or eSAFs either need the grid, which is close to capacity or not stable at times, and that is actually a topic we'll discuss next week with a consultant from Vattenfall. But so essentially, we are talking about making the investments more secure, so co-investing, co-locating. Bringing each other into the or each other's supply chain as well, and spreading those risks for the banks really can support and get to FID quicker, and that is financial investment decision quicker. So we are talking about really facilitating these conversations and bringing as much information to the SAF developers and banks, VCs, investors, everybody, because, and also this is what the UK government is supporting with. There are there is now mechanisms, financial, now it's gone out my head, the financial certainty mechanism, that is, is supporting with all of these scale-ups to de-risk as much as possible, to have interim solutions, fixed prices to guarantee a bank. And this is something we can discuss in further detail another time, but again, it's all of these topics, especially with regards to SMRs. Now the UK government is directly developing this work and has done for some time. So UK is doing very well in this area. I've also spoken to the European Commission recently, who, even though the EU doesn't directly use nuclear, the term, in policy, it is part of the low carbon fuels legislation. So I can also share that within the Loop members if you are really interested in the kind of investment opportunities here and general information of how to scale SAF. So just go back to, so yeah, I wanted to then go on to ask you, Andrew, Newcleo have invested in Newcleo. Can you tell me how that came about and why that was important to you?
Yeah, so I mentioned Stefano, our founder. You know, he's very passionate about the industry and very passionate about ensuring the industry can benefit society in the way that it has the potential to. And you know, he came across this film Newcleo Now. He went to one of the screenings, I think, in Rome, which was in the sort of original launch of the film, and he met Oliver Stone, who was doing the round with the various launches of the film, and you know, he was struck by how the message of Newcleo Now in the film is very much aligned with sort of, you know, the message he's trying to get out. You know, the history of the nuclear industry is not a simple one. You know, there's been a lot of challenge presented to the industry. You know, the whole origins of the industry are effectively back in the weapons race that happened, that we've all seen more recently in the different filmography that's come out of it. But Newcleo Now presents very nicely how kind of that challenge to the industry, the fear that was introduced through the kind of anti-bomb lobby continued, the the oil and gas lobby coming together against nuclear, and how that's kind of manifested itself in challenges for the industry, then sort of complicated through the various accidents of Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima. It tells that story really nicely, whilst then presenting kind of how important it is for the world that nuclear is recognized for all of its strengths, and that those fear factors are kind of better understood and people are better educated about them, and that, you know, we can look at a brighter future for nuclear. So, you know, Stefano was really taken by that and just wanted to support the way that was pushed forward, and it was very aligned with what he was trying to do through nuclear. So
yeah, I've watched it, and we're going to do a screening in London later in summer, so there is a link in the chat if anybody wants to attend this. I found it very enlightening. It was also surprising, but also really put into context. Also, you know, of course, fatalities have happened in the past, but it also compares it to certain other production or incidents, and it actually is very insightful to see the context. So we invite everybody to join, because I think it will be it's a perception changer. I do think people will walk out and be surprised and will change their mind about nuclear power. So thanks. I realise I started late, so I'm also now slightly over. So some people have left, but I am what I want to do is thank Andrew. So anybody that does need to leave, please do so. But what I want to do is talk about the intensive energy end user declaration. So this is something that Fly Green Alliance have signed as the first aviation group, and we have already been doing this work from last year, speaking at the International Atomic Energy Association Association and World Nuclear Association alongside Google and Dow Chemical. So we have been actively pursuing the development of SMRs and nuclear energy for eFuels for aviation. This is a really important that we get high energy users to pledge. So we encourage anyone in a large organization, or actually you can be a startup as well, but we encourage all organizations to commit to this pledge of tripling the use of and production of nuclear energy by 2050. More can be shared if you reach out to us. WNA will join us for a meeting to discuss synergies between nuclear and aviation later in the year. So we've got a lot of work on the way, which is supportive of a not new, but a newly brought into the agenda, newly brought into the net zero agenda for aviation, especially in the UK. Of course, it is, and as I said, the European Commission is also accepting nuclear as part of low carbon fuel. So lots of positive moves in Europe and the US. There's a lot of, it's also as surprising as how many countries are supportive. So please keep in touch on this topic. It's one that we will be definitely developing. We wanted to start episode 1 of In the Loop with the discussion to open up the conversation early on in the year, and we will continue to develop this. So we are very appreciative of Andrew joining and everybody that's logged into our platform today. I will have the recording to send out. There's lots of people that could not join in the end. So I will be sending the recording out to those. And the European Commission has especially requested it. So thank you very much, and I will speak to you soon.